So let's talk right off the bat about what we can anticipate the impact of the government's Fable 5 export controls on Anthropic's business to be. Even if they go back on the ban, there might be some impact.
Well, you're right to look at the Department of Defense decision from earlier this spring as the closest recent example that we might use to inform how it's going to affect Anthropic's business or business adoption going forward. I mean, let's go back to this spring when the Department of Defense labeled Anthropic a supply chain risk. Usually in most industries, for most software vendors, when you are labeled as such, businesses are not likely to continue to use that vendor going forward. So if you're just going to think about this from first principles, we would have expected businesses to shut off their Anthropic subscriptions, for new businesses to not want to sign up, for businesses to explicitly not want to use Anthropic going forward, both because of a true security concern that the government is citing and because they might want to engage with the government on government contracts. That's not what happened earlier this spring. If anything, this spring was when we saw Anthropic's adoption really accelerate with businesses. It was coming off the heels of the successful launches of Claude Code last year, finally starting to move into a more popular posture with non-technical users. Just this past month, we showed that Anthropic is now the most popular AI model used by US businesses, according to Ramp Data. So several of those assumptions didn't come to be. I think there are two main reasons why. One is that most businesses didn't really seem to take the Department of Defense's label very seriously. It was kind of like, okay, yeah, the Department of Defense is saying this, but this was one of the best models available, still is the best model available. It's popular with businesses. The second reason is that the Department of Defense lost a lot of credibility over the continuing weeks when it acknowledged that it would be issuing exceptions both internally and externally for businesses that wanted to use Anthropic anyway. So if you're going to go back to the example from earlier this spring, if anything, it's probably the case that the Department of Defense's supply chain risk labeling accelerated Anthropic's adoption with businesses. This label now, if anything, puts it on a very interesting competitive standpoint with OpenAI. Who has the better model? Probably the one that the federal government has suggested is so powerful it must be controlled.
That's right. So we talk on this show all the time about whether Anthropic's positioning around safety and the fact that it's, taken this steadfast approach when the federal government has asked it to do something, and that's led to some of these actions by the federal government, whether that's marketing. Let's put the intent aside, though. It could end up being a boost for its business, whether it wanted this to happen or not. I keep thinking about the fact that, at least we're recording Monday, and I keep thinking about the fact that when you're in Claude, it says, hey, Fable is not available right now, right? And You're seeing all these posts on X about people who are like, oh, those 5 minutes with Fable really gave me a glimpse into what this could be. And you'd imagine that when it gets turned back on, that forbidden fruit effect just kind of drives the interest in Fable, the model too powerful for the government to let you use. The interest will probably just go through the roof.
Well, let's also note that part of the product experience of using Anthropic models, at least over the last 6 months, has been getting really comfortable with models being down all the time. Because Anthropic has so many compute constraints that it is very common to be a user of Anthropic's models and to be hit with a crash notice or something that just says, hey, the models are down right now, or try again later, or an API error. And yet we would normally expect that would drive a lot of users over to OpenAI models. OpenAI doesn't have nearly as much of the compute issues that Anthropic does. And yet we haven't seen that kind of switching behavior yet over the past couple months. So maybe some marginal switching happening from people who were using Claude Code now switching over to OpenAI's Codex. But if anything, it makes me wonder, both as a researcher and user of these models, how long is this forbidden fruit effect of Anthropic's models going to last before it starts to turn users off who really just need to get to work and use the models that they are paying for?